Welcome, Tommy. Let's start with a brief introduction about yourself before we drill down on our conversation on both private networks and indoor mobile connectivity.
Okay, so I'm Tommy Ljunggren. I'm an independent consultant and work as senior advisor and board member of quite a few different companies. I've been working 35 years in the mobile industry or the telecom industry, so quite a while, mostly with operators, the Telia Group, but also the VEON Vimpelcom Group. But nowadays I'm run as an independent consultant.
Okay. Thank you, Tommy, for the brief introduction. Let's start our conversation with private networks. So let's start with what are some of the key drivers that you see for private networks?
Well, the key drivers is, of course, that the digitalization of the industry, that is one clear driver. So if you go to production companies and so on, they have been relying on either cable or Wi-Fi for quite a while. And many of them running Wi-Fi, they have realized that maybe if I have moving objects, if I'm outdoor, Wi-Fi isn't really fit for the game, so to say. There are limits in robustness and so on, and it's also subject to interference from the outdoor world, so to say, or from other users, which you can avoid with 5G. But then there are, of course, a lot of other use cases like airports where you have an operation of some kind, where you want to keep that secret and separate from the public networks. You can still combine them in the same network with like a neutral host, but still the private network part of this, you want to keep it your network, your data links and everything like that, so you can keep the data local and secure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what do you think should be the role of public MNOs, or what should be, or what areas they should focus on what are the areas that are not relevant for the public MNOs as far as private networks are concerned?
I think the public MNOs, they really have a role when it comes to organizations and businesses that have a need for the sort of the roaming, not sort of in the strict sense roaming, but roaming around. So if your users actually are moving from one location to another and need to communicate in between and so on, then you're probably towards a public private network, like a network slice or something like that. But if you do have discrete and local geographies where your operation is supposed to operate, then that's more for the private networks. And then, of course, there are everything in between there as well. So you might have some users that need to roam, but then you could, of course, use dual SIM or something. You don't really need to implement a proper roaming service as long as your terminal can roam or your SIM card can roam, which is very easy, even on sort of I mean, in the iOS 17, Apple included that as a possibility and so on, so that you can mix private and public networks in your phone.
So since you mentioned roaming, is there any additional solutions that you see in the market addressing the roaming aspect in the private networks?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, you can start with roaming SIMs, where you can have both the profile of your private network and a profile of a public network. And if the private network is there, you probably connect to that one. Then, of course, you can have sort of dual SIM in the terminal, so you actually do have two SIMs. But if you go further into actually trying to make roaming agreements with the public networks, that will be really cumbersome, because the public networks will not be able to have sort of thousands of private networks with a separate agreement, because believe it or not, but all the roaming agreements today are bi-directional. So you actually have a one-to-one agreement with each and every operator. Then, of course, there could be some roaming hubs or something like that, which actually happen in the public network as well. So maybe you can find those kind of players, but we haven't seen that yet, actually, for private networks that much.
So what's your view on having private networks on-premise versus a cloud-based private networks?
Yeah. So coming back to what I mentioned in the beginning, most of the companies, they want to keep their data private. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want the data to be exposed to the internet. And then it's very hard actually to have that on a cloud solution. So you rather go for an on-prem. But there are also other reasons. For instance, if your connectivity to the internet is poor, I have an example from Radtronics in Brazil, where you have farms quite far out in the rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
They need excellent communication on the farm, but they have very poor internet connectivity from the farm. But they can still run the operation locally in an on-prem core network, which is excellent then. But then, of course, if you again have a lot of different small installations in different geographies, then maybe you are actually looking for a cloud solution, because that might be easier for you than to buy 10 cores, even though a core is not sort of the mega big, but the major telecom vendors is providing you a core in a private network sense. Could be a NUC computer or something very small, or a laptop could actually handle a core network of a private 5G network. So
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Tommy, you gave one example. Are there some other success stories that you can highlight from
yeah,
private networks?
I mean, I mainly work with Radtronics as their advisor, and their sort of strongest case, or their most public case, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
is the sawmill in the middle of Sweden.
Okay.
I mean, sawmills are really old technology, but this sawmill is so modern,
Mm-hmm.
that there is definitely a need for a lot of connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
But they started small, so they had one use case for the trucks,
Mm-hmm.
so that the trucks actually keep track of each other, know exactly where they are, because it would be a chaos if they collide in the open areas.
Mm-hmm.
And they are outdoor, so Wi-Fi is not very fit for the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You actually need like 20 base stations or access points instead of 5G base stations to do the same job. And so they started with that, but they also entered AI recognition of the number plates on the trucks coming with the logs.
Mm-hmm.
They had some temporary offices in the big industrial area. And of course, they use sort of an FWA installation then to those local offices.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, they also use a lot of cameras with
Mm-hmm.
AI to see the quality of the logs, see the quality of the end product from the sawmill and so on. And all those cameras, they have sort of a wish that they could move them around.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, a 5G network would be really excellent, with low latencies and good capacity in the whole industrial area.
So what?
And they have tons of data every day, so they would never be able to send that to a cloud installation. So they run this on an on-prem network.
Mm-hmm.
The IT department that is running the rest of the IT and OT network of that company is actually running the radio network as well, because that is how easy it can be to have a private network. Your IT department should be able to run both the radio and the IT network.
So, continuing on that particular use case, I mean, what were some of the challenges when they moved to deploy private networks, including you mentioned about IT and OT. So what were the integration challenges or anything that is related, and how did they overcome?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for industrial 5G or in the industry 4.0 is actually the OT and the IT integration. And then when we come with this 3GPP 5G standard, it doesn't really fit with all the protocols, all the different ways of building an OT network, and it doesn't fit with the IT network. And then also some of the machinery in the industry might be very old. So in some industries that I've been talking to, they actually have like very old Windows versions in the machinery, working hand in hand with sort of a totally modern 5G network. So there are so many protocol conversions, and then you also want to segment your whole network in the OT environment. So most of the challenges I see in the private network project is actually around the OT and the IT and the integration between these. But the radio part of this, it's really easy. I mean, I'm sad to say that because it used to be very complicated and you could get a very high salary as a radio engineer. But for private networks, that's not the case.
Thank you, Tommy. Tommy, I think those were some of the key areas that I wanted to focus on private networks. Now let's
Yeah.
move on to the indoor mobile connectivity. So let's
Yes.
start with the first one. What is the need for the high capacity indoor networks?
Well, I mean, if we look at after the pandemic, we all came back to the offices and we realized that we have started to work in a totally different way. All of us had the Teams meeting, and even if we were sitting in the same conference room, we were all connected on a Teams meeting with the connectivity. And we very quickly realized that the capacity of the Wi-Fi network is not enough
Yeah.
because you had a lag and all the problems that you realized. And this is just now, but looking into the future, we will have even more advanced uses. We might use AR and VR or want to use that. And to do that, we need high capacity. And you can build this with Wi-Fi, but it's easier to do it with mobile connectivity. And therefore, the need of capacity is really increasing very quickly. And then in an office or an arena or so, there is often a very crowded space. So there are a lot of people doing more and more complicated things, demanding better and better latencies and so on. So the need for speed and the need for low delay is just increasing every day. And looking at that, we also see the trend that it is actually cheaper for a company to go mobile first, to only have 5G laptops, and let them be sort of the normal working tool for the staff, even if there is a premium on a 5G laptop. That is cheaper than to normally cheaper than to build at least a medium-sized Wi-Fi network.
Understood, understood. So it's a in the ecosystem of the indoor networks, who do you think should pay for the indoor networks?
Well, actually, since I work with Proptivity, which is a neutral host, that company is formed by the real estate industry. And that actually says it all, because the real estate industry has understood the benefits of having a good connectivity in the indoor environment and the office and in commercial areas, real estate areas, and so on. And if you calculate how much extra they can actually earn per square meter, if they just increase like 0.5% of the rent or so, that is a massive amount bigger than what the operators ever can get out of sort of the connectivity in that building. So therefore, it is quite obvious that the one with the greatest benefit, which is the real estate companies, they can and they actually want to pay for this connectivity. They look at it more and more like electricity and water and so on. So they are prepared to pay for this because they can see the benefits and they can also see the effects. If they don't have a good connectivity, the companies will choose a different office and they will have a lot of vacancies. And vacancies is what the real estate owners hate. So they make everything to avoid that.
You mentioned about real estate owners and you mentioned about neutral host. So I was just trying to understand what's the role, what's the difference, where is what would be the importance or what areas should real estate owners focus on, and where does the role of the neutral host come into the play?
Yeah. Okay. So the real estate owner should really stay as a real estate owner and focus on the real estate business and making sure that the tenants in the building are happy. And normally the real estate owner don't have the skills and the competence of running mobile networks. So therefore, there is a need for a third party to actually take that role to gather all the operators in one network in the building, and even connecting maybe a private network if this real estate owner or a company in that building want to have a private network. And the company I work for, Propertivity, we have chosen then to sell this as a service. So we sell per square meter. So the real estate owner decides what kind of speeds they want to have in the building, what kind of capacity they need in the building. Maybe they only need like low speed 4G in the garage, but they need really high speed 5G capacity in the in the retail areas, because the shops want to have VR and AR experience in the shops. And then they pay that per square meter, and the operator they connect for free, and the neutral host or the operator, I mean the neutral host don't pay the operator and the operator don't pay the neutral host. It's only a transaction between the neutral host and the real estate owner. And then the end user, they keep their contact with their public MNO. So they have their subscription with the MNO, and the end user services is delivered by the mobile operator, not by the neutral host. The neutral host is an access operator.
So what are some of the ways, if I look from an end user perspective, what are some of the ways that the neutral host vendor or the relevant technology vendor in the ecosystem can optimize the indoor connectivity?
Yeah, I mean, the old way of building neutral host networks and neutral networks was really to build with old distributed antenna systems. But then you put a base station in the basement for each and every operator. In the other model with small cells in the building instead, this is one base station for all operators. And with the old distributed antenna systems, you can't get the same capacity per square meter, and there is very hard to get sort of indoor positioning with a distributed antenna system. In a small cell system, each and every access point can sort of calculate the indoor position, and it also contributes to the capacity of the building. So you get a massive capacity compared to a rather low capacity with a DAS system. On top of that, the energy efficiency of a small cell system compared to a distributed antenna system is normally enormous difference there. So each operator putting a high power base station in the basement, that is a waste of energy compared to having a small cell system with one base station shared by all the operators.
Thank you so much, Tommy, for this input on both private networks and the indoor connectivity.